Are you using marijuana? Are you depressed? Have you suffered some sort of trauma? All of that impacts your brain in incredible ways, and not happy ones. Dr. Daniel Amen, a renowned brain specialist, will tell you not only how those things affect your brain, but how you can restore it. This is an Arroyo Grande that could literally save your life. Come on in. I'm Raymond Arroyo. Welcome to Arroyo Grande. I don't want to waste any time because this is really an urgent and important episode. If you're suffering from brain fog, or you can't recall things that once came easily, if Alzheimer's runs in your family, or if you're using marijuana, you have to listen to this show. Dr. Daniel Amen, a neuroscientist and psychiatrist, has spent his life teaching people how to heal their brains and lives. Everything you're going to hear today is actionable. By the way, go subscribe to the Arroyo Grande Show right now on YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. Turn the notifications on. I don't want you to miss an episode, and be sure you like this one, and you will. We are joined now by Dr. Daniel Amen, brain specialist, New York Times bestselling author, and founder of the Amen Clinics. Doctor, thank you so much for being with us. I've always been and long fascinated by your work. The center of it seems, to my eye at least, the taking of these 3D SPECT images of the brain. How did you come upon SPECT imaging? Why do you use that in your practice?
Well, psychiatrists are the only medical doctors who virtually never look at the organ they treat. And when I became a psychiatrist, decided to be a psychiatrist in 1979, I knew that was wrong, and I knew it would change. I just had no idea I'd be part of it. In 1991, I went to a lecture on brain SPECT imaging. It's a nuclear medicine study that looks at blood flow and activity. It looks at how your brain works. And it basically shows you three things: good activity, too little, or too much. And you've heard it said, a picture's worth 1,000 words. But a map is worth 1,000 pictures. A map tells you where you are and then gives you direction on how to get to where you want to go. And that's exactly what I saw with SPECT. You would come in. I published a brand new paper out yesterday in JAMA Psychiatry, so one of the best journals in the world, on depression. And what we showed is when you lump 15,000 people with depression, you see overall pretty severe low activity in the brain. But having treated depressed people for over 30 years, it's like they're not all the same. Some have low activity, some have high activity, some look like they have toxic exposure from drugs, alcohol, or mold. Some look like they have infections, some look like they have head trauma. And if you don't look at the individual person in front of you, you actually have no idea what's going on in their brain, and trying this medicine, this treatment is like throwing darts in the dark. And I just became a heck of a lot more effective when I would look. And then the other big benefit is people fell in love with their brains and they started treating them better. So they're smoking less pot, they're drinking less alcohol, they're eating less bad food because they get engaged in wanting a better brain.
Dr. Raymond, how does dementia present, for instance, when you look at these scans, and how early can you see it?
So Alzheimer's disease actually starts in the brain decades before you have any symptoms. But Alzheimer's is only one of 10 different dementia categories. And SPECT actually helps to distinguish between, is it frontal temporal lobe dementia, the kind of dementia Bruce Willis has? Is it Alzheimer's? disease? Is it vascular dementia? Is it alcoholic dementia? Is it Lewy body dementia, what Robin Williams had? And I wrote a book in 2005 called Preventing Alzheimer's and got no end of grief for writing it. It's like, no, you can't do that. Don't give people false hope. And last year in The Lancet, there was an article that said 50% of Alzheimer's disease is preventable. And so I think everybody should be scanned at 50. But if you have it in your family, you probably should be scanned when you're 40.
Okay, but doctor, I want to just stop you 1 second. Why not use a PET scan or an MRI, which I'm told is more advanced and gives you clearer imaging?
Well, it's not true. And MRI is a structural study. And the problem is functional problems always start before you see structural problems. And SPECT and PET are cousins to each other. PET does have a little bit better resolution, but no one in the world has the experience we have at Amen Clinics, where we've done over 260,000 scans on people from 155 countries. Wow. So, and we actually are able to use AI now to read the scans as if they were my eyes. And we're very excited about it. And I believe that we can prevent much of dementia if, and here's the plan, if you want to keep your brain healthy or rescue it, you have to prevent or treat the 11 major risk factors that steal your mind. And we know what they are. That, for example, if you're overweight, that increases your risk. If you abuse drugs, that increases your risk. If you're depressed, that increases your risk. But a brand new study out, I'm actually going to post on it tomorrow, that people on SSRIs like Prozac, Zoloft, Lexapro, Celexa, if you have dementia and you're on one of those medications, it accelerates memory loss.
Really?
Those medications are inhibitory. They increase serotonin. Serotonin calms things down in the brain. So if you have a busy brain, they're the right thing for you. But dementia generally is a sleepy brain, and they actually can make things worse. But again, how would you know if you didn't look?
Yeah.
And I often feel like Galileo, who was imprisoned at the end of his life. And what did Galileo do? He developed a high-powered telescope, looked at the stars, and said, the Earth is not the center of the universe.
Yeah, you got it all wrong. And of course, look, but he was eventually proven, and even the church caught up and forgave Galileo and themselves, I think, in the mix. But look, Dr. Raymond, Alzheimer's, and this is something that affects millions of us, millions of families. The effects of this disease currently hit 7 million people, and it's expected to triple in the coming decades. Tell me what is fueling it. What is fueling the explosion in Alzheimer's that we're seeing? And I imagine the isolation of this pandemic will only exacerbate things in the years to come.
The pandemic did so many bad things for our society as a whole. COVID all by itself causes inflammation in the brain and increases the risk of anxiety, depression, and dementia. And then if you add, well, they locked us at home, so the isolation, they left the liquor stores open, so the isolation, more alcohol. They left us at home, so they ate bad food, so obesity continued to climb. And of the 11 major risk factors, if you're overweight, you automatically have 10 of them. Wow. It's like we have to be serious with 75% of the population overweight, 43% obese. there's nothing about this that's okay when it comes to brain health.
Well, Dr. Raymond, what are the primary early indicators you see of dementia? What are the things when people walk in the door, you see these things that some probably take for granted? You know, they're minor things. What should we be on the lookout for?
If your memory is worse than it was 10 years ago, you should be concerned because there's an 80% chance it'll continue to get worse. If you're starting to make poor decisions, if you say things that hurt others people's feelings, and that's not been sort of the story of your life. So you look at memory, decision making, socialization. Some people who start losing their memory start to isolate themselves because they're like, I just don't remember people's names anymore and I'll be embarrassed. So that is something. They start having more accidents because if you put your thumbs in your ears and your hands on your head, that's the pattern for Alzheimer's disease. So it's bilateral. Parietal lobe, decreased activity. That's why people get lost, and it's why people get into more accidents, because this is direction sense and depth perception. And then your temporal lobes, that's memory and also recall of things like names and places. And Raymond, we're diagnosing this later than ever before because of smartphones. Because before, someone who'd lived in a city for 30 years, they'd forget how to go home. They would call their family from a phone booth and go, I'm lost, and they'd be freaked out, and their family would bring them in to see me. But now since 2007, you can go, hey Siri, take me home. And so we're actually, and people don't want to see it in their family. And so they often deny until there's overwhelming evidence. And I'm like, I think we should be screening everybody. And another reason we're seeing it more is because of the obesity epidemic.
I was just going to ask you that. How does obesity affect the brain? What is the tangible impact of obesity? And you said it, 75% of the population is obese, doctor. What impact does that have when you look at these brains?
So I published 3 studies on 33,000 people showing as your weight goes up, the size and function of the brain goes down. And that should scare the fat off anyone. And so if you look at the 11 major risk factors, being overweight decreases blood flow. It prematurely ages your brain. Fat cells produce something called inflammatory cytokines. So you have more inflammation in your body. It changes genetic expression. Fat stores toxins. You're more at risk for mental health stuff like depression. It changes your immune system. One of the worst things it does is it takes healthy testosterone and turns it into unhealthy cancer-promoting forms of estrogen.
Wow.
Yeah, it's very disruptive. And I never mean to fat shame anyone, but it's like if you can't tell the truth in our society, this is not good for the health of your brain or body. And we've supersized everything. And when you go to a restaurant, they give you these crazy meals. We need to be way more thoughtful of what we put in our bodies, which is why I'm a huge fan of, RFK Jr. And it's like, well, let's at least talk about getting healthy.
Yeah. Well, I like in one of your books, you say when you go to dinner with a very fit person, because that will inevitably restrain what you order because, you don't want to be embarrassed in somebody who's in great shape. Give me a sense of, you mentioned there a moment ago, reduced blood flow. I was stunned when I read in one of your books, and we read about this across the culture. You see these ads every time you turn around, erectile dysfunction this and erectile dysfunction that. that is actually a marker that you cite as an early indicator of dementia.
Well, if
Why?
you have blood flow problems anywhere, they're everywhere. And one of the biggest benefits, like I shouldn't say it that way, one of the benefits of getting on one of our brain health programs is your sex life gets better. With blood flow, what are you doing that decreases blood flow? Caffeine, nicotine, being sedentary, alcohol, marijuana. And what are you doing to increase blood flow, which is exercise, beets, oregano, cayenne pepper, ginkgo, one of my favorite supplements.
Tell me about the effect of trauma, doctor. We often hear about, depression and, obesity and the physical body affecting the brain. But in your books, you talk about the effect of trauma, not necessarily physical trauma, but emotional trauma on the brain.
So we published a huge new study this year on 7,500 people looking at adverse childhood experiences. So there's an ACE questionnaire on a scale of 0 to 10. How many bad things happened to you growing up, from physical, emotional, sexual abuse to neglect, to being raised by a parent with mental illness, addiction, going to prison? If you have 4 or more, that you have an increased risk of 7 of the top 10 leading causes of death. If you have 6 or more, you die 20 years earlier. And so we studied them, and what we found is childhood trauma activated the limbic or emotional circuits in the brain, making you at greater risk for anxiety, depression, worry, and obsessiveness. And the exciting news is if you see it, well, then you can calm it down. But if you never look, you don't know, is the brain working too hard or not hard enough?
You write about people who obsess over perceived wrongs. I read this in one of your books recently. It's like they're recycling and they're revisiting all those wounds of the past. They keep them very much alive. How do you get past that? You're a psychiatrist. What would you advise people?
Well, I teach my patients to kill the ants, the automatic negative thoughts that steal their happiness. I never want people drinking away their pain or medicating their pain. I want them to go into it and actually write it down. Whenever you have a thought, your brain releases chemicals. Whenever you have a happy thought, a hopeful thought, your brain releases a completely different set of chemicals that make you feel good. But when you have a grudge thought, an angry thought, a hopeless, helpless thought, your brain releases chemicals that increase your limbic brain, but also increase cortisol and make you more likely to be sick. So one of the things to do, here's the exercise. Whenever you feel sad, mad, nervous, or out of control, write down what you're thinking and then ask yourself, is it true? Is it absolutely true? How do I feel when I have this thought? How would I feel if I didn't have the thought? And then what I really love is take the original thought, my wife never listens to me, turn it to the opposite, my wife listens to me, and then meditate on that. And what you find is you stop letting your undisciplined mind torture you. And you think in a more realistic, rational, hopeful way. And I love the idea of give your mind a name, and that way you can gain some distance from it. I named my mind after my pet raccoon when I was 16, and I loved her, but she was a troublemaker. All sorts of trouble, which is just my mind. It stirs up stuff that doesn't help me. And I'm not a fan of accurate thinking, of positive thinking. I'm a fan of accurate thinking. With a positive spin, because we have a new study coming out on negativity bias, and that's very bad for your
Yeah,
brain.
well, that's what I was going to say. In all of your books, you write about the stories we tell ourselves, about our relationships. That does have a supreme and major influence on your health, your mind, and your brain's well-being, which is something you just don't think about.
Well, there's nowhere in school, think about this with me, Raymond. There's nowhere in school where we teach children how to manage their minds. And isn't that crazy? Like, I was 28 years old in my psychiatric residency at the Walter Reed Army Medical Center, and one of our professors said, you have to teach your patients not to believe every stupid thing they think. And I'm like, but I believe every stupid thing I think. And it caused me no end of grief. And now, when I have a thought, I realize, oh, it's just a thought, that I don't have to attach to it. I can question it and I can go, well, does this thought serve me? Does this thought helpful for me? Will this thought help me have a better relationship with my wife, do a better job with my patients? And if it doesn't serve me, I'm like, oh, I don't need you. It's not the thoughts you have that make you suffer. It's the thoughts you attach to. Seinfeld once said, the brain is a sneaky organ. We all have weird, crazy, stupid, sexual, violent thoughts that nobody should ever hear. And you know people where they have no filter, like whatever they think gets out of their mouth. And that's usually because their frontal lobes are sleepy. They don't have a break in their brain. Because when people come to me and they go, I'm brutally honest, my first thought is that's usually not helpful.
Uh-huh. Well, you mentioned Walter Reed, where you did your residency, and I want to get to that in a moment because reading all your books, I thought, I'll bet that Walter Reed experience was pretty foundational for you. But I want to get to that in a moment. The most important thing I need to tackle now, how can you protect yourself, doctor, from Alzheimer's, especially if it runs in your family? What are the practical things people can do right now?
Well, so if we go through the 11 major risk factors, I'll just give you one simple thing for each of them. So the acronym is Bright Minds, and the B is for blood flow. Low blood flow is the number one brain imaging predictor of Alzheimer's disease. Walk like you're late, 45 minutes, 4 or 5 times a week. You should do that if you have it in your family. R is retirement and aging, new learning. Every day, 10 minutes, learn something new, something that you don't know how to do, that you're not good at. Push your brain to learn. The I is inflammation. There's so many things you could do there. Floss your teeth. Take really great care of your gums. And take fish oil, omega-3 fatty acid, because it's anti-inflammatory. The G is genetics, and we don't think about genes right. So you may have an ApoE4 gene, 1 or 2 of them. That increases your risk. I think all of us should know. But genes aren't a death sentence. What they are is a wake-up call. If I had it in my family, I'm going to be on an Alzheimer's prevention program my whole life. H is head trauma, a major cause of dementia that very few people know about. If you've had head injuries, concussions, car accidents, got your bell rung playing sports, I'm a huge fan of hyperbaric oxygen. I mean, but what, Raymond, we got to look.
Yeah.
If you don't look, you don't know. T is toxins. Stop thinking of alcohol as a health food. The American Cancer Society, for goodness sakes, came out 3 years ago and said it increases the risk of 7 different types of cancer. Alcohol is pro-dementia and pro-depression.
Any kind of alcohol?
Any kind of alcohol.
Wine? Everything?
Everything.
Wow.
And they're empty calories. And they cause you to say things you shouldn't say.
Well, they say wine is good for you because of the blood flow. Oh, the Italians do it, the French drink it, and look how healthy they are. You don't agree with that?
It's a lie. we've been sold a bill of goods. Even this year, the Surgeon General came out and said you shouldn't drink because of its association with cancer. Um, M is mental health. So
Yep.
learn to not believe every stupid thing you think, because depression. If you're a girl, a female, and you have depression, it doubles your risk of Alzheimer's disease. If you're a male, it quadruples your risk. And
Now, why
so,
is that?
um, and it could be because what we saw in the study we just published this week, the low activity in the
Mm,
brain. But it also, with depression, comes memory problems, comes isolation. And one of the types of dementia that we see on SPECT is called pseudo dementia, where it's really severe depression that masquerades as dementia.
mm.
Very interesting. Um, the second I is immunity and infections. Know your vitamin D level and get it high. I never wanted to be in the bottom of my class. I always wanted to be at the top of my class. What is not a normal level? What is an optimal level? N is neurohormones. You should have your hormones tested every year. I had like 3 patients today with low testosterone
Mm.
levels, and all the products we put on our body, they're hormone disruptors and decrease your testosterone levels.
Mm.
And then D is diabetes. Know how many calories, have a sense. If I eat this many calories a day, I'm more likely to gain weight, less. It's not just calories, right? It's the quality of your calories, but calories count too. And then go to bed half an hour early because sleep is absolutely essential. So those are the bright minds and just some high level things to
Yeah.
do. People could read my book, Change Your Brain, every day. Of all my books, I think that's the one to read because it's 366 short essays on the most important things I've ever said.
And very practical. You can do them every day, and you encourage people to read them day by day, because I've read them. How do you start your day, doctor? What's your routine? What do you eat when you begin the day, and do you have coffee?
So I start every day with today is going to be a great day. I
Mm.
push my mind to look for what I'm excited about. I end every day with what went well today. And it's actually a pretty detailed practice. I say a prayer and then I go hour by hour looking for what I loved about the day until I'm asleep. I start with a decaf cappuccino that I make for my wife and I with unsweetened almond milk and a little bit of stevia. Put in creatine and something we make called smart mushrooms.
Hmm.
So it's just delicious. Brand new study out on creatine. Not only does it give you bigger muscles, it also helps to treat depression and help your mind be sharper. 5 grams of creatine. Very excited about that. And then usually for me, I have a couple of eggs, and then later on, I'll make a shake for myself with a healthy protein powder and nutrients in it, and half a cup of blueberries. I'll generally have a salad in the middle of the day, and almost always in the morning, I go on a long walk with our 2 dogs and my wife, and we sort of start the day connecting with exercise. Uh,
Hmm.
and then I look for what I love about the day, just sort of the micro miracles. What are the littlest things that I can find that make me happy? And like a butterfly or a hummingbird or that first taste of brain healthy hot chocolate I make at night, virtually every night, because my wife looks at me and goes, and this is like, do you love me? Will you make me brain healthy hot chocolate?
Okay, now I want to go back to the beginning. You did your psychiatric training at Walter Reed, which you mentioned. What did that place and that particular cohort of clients teach you that you've carried with you into this part of your life and work?
So I was out of high school. I went into the Army because Vietnam was going on, and I became an infantry medic, where my love of medicine was born.
Hmm.
So after I finished, got out of the Army then and finished college and medical school, I went back in as an Army captain and served the military and their dependents and just loved it because it was familiar to me. I felt at home. At Walter Reed, we saw all the really unusual things
Yeah.
in psychiatry that you typically don't see in sort of a day-to-day outpatient clinic. And
Right.
it was fun and fascinating. And yeah, I learned so much and loved my experience there. And then I'm also a child psychiatrist. I did that in Tripler Army Medical Center in Hawaii.
Hmm.
Completely loved Honolulu and my experience there. But where I grew the most is a little place in the middle of the Mojave Desert
Hmm.
called Fort Irwin, where I was the only psychiatrist for 10,000 people. And I just loved it so much. And I brought brain imaging technology to, because I'm the boss. And so I just had to get my boss to approve it, where we started doing neurofeedback, where we could put electrodes on your scalp, start measuring brain activity, and then based on what we saw, teach you to change it. And that's where I got the idea, change your brain, change your life. And
Hmm.
that has really been foundational for the rest of my career. So when I went to the lecture in 1991 on brain SPECT imaging, I'd already been thinking about it. I'd already primed. It's like if you don't look, you don't know, but you can take bad brains and make them better. You can take good brains and make them great.
Incredible. And the diversity of people I imagine that you meet in the military, especially people coming back from war or hostile situations. I'm sure that's a very specialized type of medicine as opposed to the generic folks that walk through the door today.
I don't know. At Amen Clinics,
You
we
see a
see
lot.
people who have failed on average six medicines, 3.3 providers, and
Mm.
we've seen a whole bunch of very interesting things. And we have a nonprofit foundation,
Yeah.
Change Your Brain Foundation. We're actually doing a special project now for firefighters.
Mm.
Because I did the big NFL study when the NFL was sort of lying. It had a problem with traumatic brain injury in football.
Hmm.
It's like, stop lying about it. Bad for the brain.
Yeah.
But 80% of our players got better. But what I realized afterwards, as much as I love our football players, they're not heroes. They're entertainers.
Mm.
Firefighters are heroes. And what we saw recently with the devastation in California, in Los Angeles, our foundation raising money specifically for firefighters to scan them, treat them so that did you know firefighters have a 40% increased risk of suicide?
I did
And
not
there's
know
something
that.
about that that's
Why? Why is that?
because of the toxic exposure
Oh,
and
wow.
the trauma, like talk about emotional trauma. Right?
Hmm.
Every day they spend time with people on the worst day of their lives. And so you end up being re traumatized over and over again. And often because of the machismo, it's like, oh, there's nothing the matter with me. I don't need help. They end up medicating the trauma with alcohol.
You mentioned in passing, I don't want to let this go before I move on. You said 80% of the NFL players you worked with who had experienced head trauma, that they improved. How? What did you give them to do? Was it medication? Was it practice?
No, it's actually a multiple vitamin, high dose B vitamins, because there are a number of studies that say B6, B12, and folate in these particular dosages decrease the conversion of mild cognitive impairment to Alzheimer's disease. And it grew their hippocampus, major memory structure in the brain. I'm like, okay, multiple vitamin with those doses of Bs, high dose of omega-3 fatty acids, and nutrients found to increase blood flow and activity like ginkgo. So we put them on this supplement protocol that, and then told them to stop doing things that hurt their brain, alcohol, marijuana, and so on. That was it. 80% of them were better. Now,
Incredible.
also added later hyperbaric oxygen, which we found helpful. And if they were depressed, we would add either supplements like saffron or medication if needed. But 80% was just on the nutrient program and a little bit of brain health education.
Incredible. Tell me about marijuana use. We talked about this in passing, but you see all of these states legalizing this. So many young people, so many young men use it just the way you would smoke a cigar or have a drink. In fact, it's a daily, in fact, multiple practice a day. And I'm often told, by people who use it regularly, look, it just mellows me out. It has no long-term effect. You studied this. What did you find, and how does it affect the brain?
So I studied it. I mean, I've been studying it for 34 years now with imaging, and their brains look older than they are. It's not good for the brain. And then I published a study on 1,000 marijuana users. Every area of their brain is lower in blood flow and activity. And then just a couple of weeks ago in JAMA Psychiatry, there's an article not from my group, from a completely separate group on 1,000 marijuana users. The learning and memory centers of their brain significantly lower in activity. And it's common knowledge among psychiatrists, and studies show that teenagers who use, and teenagers in massive numbers now think it's harmless.
Yes,
and
they do.
Doing it with their parents. So, I mean, this is the insanity that's happening in our society. And teenagers who use in their 20s increase anxiety, depression, suicide, and psychosis. This is not okay. Now, I'm not a fan, if you're smoking pot, for them to arrest you and send you to jail. I don't think that's a good use of our resources. But we need, and President Trump talked about this when he was at the Department of Justice, we need a serious brain health education, a drug prevention education program. And I don't know if you know, but after I listened to him, I thought, how much does Anheuser-Busch spend a year in marketing? Because the president said he raised like $50 million for this campaign.
Yeah.
Anheuser-Busch spends $6.8 billion a year on sales and marketing. I'm like, we spend what, almost $1 trillion on our defense budget, but
Right.
you're much more likely to die from depression, suicide, obesity, dementia than you are from a nuclear warhead. And shouldn't we be serious about having a prevention, a Department of Defense for brain health? And my big goal, maybe you can help me with it,
Yeah.
I want to create a brain health revolution. And I think this administration is the only one that can do it.
Does marijuana use, does it make you more susceptible to Alzheimer's? I imagine it does, because you're constricting blood flow.
Yes, because it does not give you a healthy brain over time. The studies, because it's only been legal for a very short time, there are no great long-term studies. But if I wanted to prevent Alzheimer's and I had it in my family, I absolutely wouldn't use it.
Doctor, I find, particularly when you talk to young people today, there are wanderers, people who are they're just wandering, waiting for the next experience, waiting for something to happen. You developed something that has intrigued me for a long time. It's called the one-page miracle. Tell people what that is and the power it has.
I love this exercise so much. It's actually the first thing I do with all of my patients. On one piece of paper, write down what you want: relationships, work, money, physical, emotional, spiritual health. What do you want? And then you ask yourself, is my behavior getting me what I want? In one of my books, I rewrote the 12-step program, that was actually written 85 years ago to help people with alcoholism and addiction. Yeah. And, step one in the 12-step program is my life is out of control. And I'm like, no, that's not step one, that's step two. Step one is, well, what the heck do you want? What kind of relationship do you want to have? What do you want to do at work? What do you want with your money? What do you want with your physical, emotional, spiritual health? Because then step two becomes really easy. Is my behavior getting me what I want, or is in fact my life been hijacked by a substance or a practice?
And what does it tell us, that exercise, about the power of what we tell ourselves? The story we repeat in our own heads.
Well, it's intention. You have to tell your brain is the most complicated, beautiful, elegant organ in the universe. But like any computer, you have to tell it what to do. And if you tell it, oh, I want a kind, caring, loving, supportive relationship with my wife, well, then when you get that thought that's rude, you just don't say it, because it doesn't help you get what you want. I don't have any tattoos, and I actually don't recommend them because there's new research coming out on lymphomas and tattoos. But if I had, it would be, does it fit? Does my behavior today fit the goals I have for my life? But you have to know what you want. And Raymond, I find so many people, like 95% of my patients, when I do this exercise with them, they hadn't really thought about it. They spent more time thinking about their vacation than what they really want in their lives.
No, we plan our meals and we plan our vacations more than we plan our lives. And sometimes you got to invert that. In one of your books, Doctor, and I'm a perpetual hummer. I'm humming all day long. When I walk out the door in the morning, I'm humming or singing something. You talk about the power of toning or humming. Share that with people. That was kind of fascinating to me. How it can change your spirits and really rejuvenate you in some ways.
Well, in a number of really important ways, it actually increases your breath and increases your lung capacity by doing that on a regular basis. Also, the tunes are activating your cerebellum and your temporal lobe. So the cerebellum is the Rodney Dangerfield part of the brain. Now, I hate it. A lot of young people have no idea who Rodney Dangerfield is, which just ages me. But he's a very famous comedian.
Hilarious.
Who used to say, I get no respect. So the cerebellum is 10% of the brain's volume, but 50% of the brain's neurons. And it is like the master controller in your brain. And humming activates it, which just will then turn on the rest of your brain. And during the pandemic, we released a supplement I love called Happy Saffron. And my assistant took it. And the next day she's humming at work, because we're working from my house. And I'm like, why are you humming? And she said, I don't know. I'm just happy.
You see, it's a symptom. It's a good thing. Well, music is, it makes the soul buoyant, and I guess the mind as well. You wrote a book recently called Raising Mentally Strong Kids. And it seems to me the major key here is building of those relationships, bonding with that child. What is the thing that parents often miss, Doctor? What do they miss out on? I know one of the big ones is just authority, making themselves the authority there, but doing it with love.
It's the relationship that too often devices are getting in the middle of relationships, and parents aren't spending the time and they're not listening. And because of that, they often feel guilty. So they overdo and they solve their children's problems. And when you do that, you are building your self-esteem by stealing theirs. Because self-esteem actually comes from feeling and acting in competent ways. I can deal with this challenge. So when your child comes to you and says, "I'm bored," rather than go, "Well, you could do this, or we could do that, or have you thought about this?" Go, "Oh, you're bored." It's just active listening. Repeat back what you're hearing, and then let them fill in
Figure it out.
and then go, "Well, I wonder what you're going to do about it." And, and if you've been solving all of their problems up till now, they might have a meltdown. It's like, "I don't know, I don't know." And it's like, you'll figure it out.
Yeah, let them figure it out. I guess we're afraid, though, of giving kids too much responsibility. And I see a lot of parents, they never want to let their kids fail. And I guess the flip side is the drill sergeant parent. You're not good at anything. You'll never amount to anything. What's the balance there?
Firm and kind. Whenever you don't know what to do, go to those two words. The best parents are firm. When they say something, they mean it, and they expect it to be complied with, but they're kind. I always say, think of the best coach you ever had. The best coaches notice what you do right, and they teach you so you can be better. The worst coaches, the worst parents, notice what you do wrong, and they never let you forget it. And so bonding requires time, actual physical time. There's an exercise in the book I love. It's called special time. 20 minutes a day, do something with your child wants to do. And during that time, no commands, no questions, no directions. It's just time to be together. If you're like, "My child will never talk to me," it's probably because you're not spending enough time with them and you're not listening. And then active listening. Stop talking over them. Stop trying to cram, the 30 or 40, 50 years of experience you have in their heads. They're going to pick up just by living with you what you think and what you know. Your job is to help them learn how to think. And you do that through listening, asking thoughtful questions, and not giving them the answer.
Doctor, ADD and ADHD is exploding in kids. Do you believe in the medical approach, a medication, giving them medicines to cope, or is there another approach? Is there another way that perhaps we're missing here?
So ever since I've been a psychiatrist, every year they say ADD is exploding. And so it's been exploding for a long time. In fact, it is increasing in the population.
Why?
In part because kids aren't exercising, kids aren't out in the sunlight as much as they were before. Their devices are draining their dopamine availability, and we're feeding them bad food. So if you take all of those things, I was just at a play for one of my grandkids, and the number of overweight kids, it's shocking.
Yeah.
And if you're overweight, you're not getting the exercise, you're getting a lot of bad food, that is going to cause your brain to be more sluggish. Now, so first thing I do, brain healthy habits, exercise, and I like to put people on an elimination diet for a month. Let's just get rid of gluten, dairy, corn, soy, artificial dyes, and sweeteners. 2 studies published in the Lancet. Kids who went on ADD kids who went on an elimination diet, 72% lost their ADD. And so let's start there. But
Yeah.
if it doesn't work, omega-3 fatty acids can help, zinc, magnesium. So then we'll go to a supplement regimen. And then if it doesn't work, I'm going to go to medicine. Why?
Yeah.
Because ADD is real. And when left untreated, right, if it's not because of devices or a low quality diet, left untreated, kids don't finish high school. 33% of untreated ADD kids don't finish high school. There's a higher incidence of drug abuse, divorce, incarceration, and the medicine can change their lives. And I write about it in my books that several of my kids have ADD, and the medicine took them from being mediocre to straight A students. And I just, it's never about medicine or not.
Yeah.
It's about, well, what's best for your brain.
Yeah. Somewhere in one of the books, or maybe a mutual friend told me that you have collected, Dr. Raymond, hundreds of penguins. Why do you collect penguins? They're in your office, they're everywhere.
Yeah, it's a little bit of an obsession. When my oldest, who I adopted, was 7, he was really hard for me. And I was talking to my supervisor. So I'm in Hawaii at the time, talking to my child psychiatry supervisor. She said, oh, you should probably spend more alone time with him, which was sort of the last thing I wanted to do because he was argumentative and oppositional. And I took him to a place called Sea Life Park, which is in Hawaii. And it's like Marine World or Sea World. And we went to the killer whale show, and that was great, and the dolphin show, which was fun, and the sea lion show, which was hysterical. And at the end of the day, grabs my shirt, and he goes, I want to see Fat Freddy. And I'm like, who's Fat Freddy? He said, it's the penguin, Dad. Don't you know anything? Which was sort of our relationship. And we went to it was the last show of the day, in this beautiful stadium on Oahu. And this little fat, humble penguin comes on the stage, climbs the ladder to a high dive, goes to the end of the board, bounces on it, and then jumps in the water. And I'm like, holy smokes. And then he gets out of the water, bowls with his nose, counts with his flipper, jumps through a hoop of fire. And I'm like blown away with this little bird. And then at the end of the show, the trainer asked Freddie to go get something, and Freddie went and got it, and he brought it right back. And in my mind, like time stood still. I'm like, damn, I asked this kid to get something for me, and he wants to have a discussion for like 20 minutes. And I knew my son was smarter than the penguin. And so I went up to the trainer afterwards, because, you know, I'm a child psychiatry trainee. I don't know anything. I'm like, how'd you get the penguin to do all these really cool things? And she looked at my son, and then she looked at me and said, unlike parents, whenever Freddie does anything like what I want him to do, I notice him. I give him a hug, and I give him a fish. And the light went on in my head that even though my son didn't like raw fish, that whenever he did what I wanted him to do, I wasn't paying any attention to him because I was like my dad. I was too busy. And I realized I was teaching him to be bad as a way to get my attention. So I collect penguins to remind me to notice what I like about other people way more than what I don't like. Because ultimately, every day you are shaping the people in your life by what you notice.
That is fascinating. That may be the most brilliant and smart, insightful, practical thing for me that I think I've gotten out of today's conversation. Your constant refrain, Doctor, is we are not stuck with the brain we have. We can do something practically to improve it, to reverse the damage, what advice would you give people? What are a few practical things they can do?
Every day you are making your brain better or you're making your brain worse by what you do with it. And if you want a better memory tomorrow, go to bed a half an hour early tonight. When you go to eat something, ask yourself, do I love this? And does it love me back? Because you're in a relationship. I don't know if you've ever been in a bad relationship, but I have, and I'm not doing it anymore.
Yeah.
I married my best friend, and no, and I'm for certain not doing it with food or the thing I drink.
Well, doctor, I live in New Orleans. Everything I love is probably not good for me. So I just stay away from the restaurants. It's the only way I can survive because everything, you want that big sloppy po' boy. You want that extra gumbo, but it will kill you. You just have to
But
stop.
that's like wanting that woman, that is just going to break your heart. It's like, no, you want to look at it and go, oh, that's so nice, but I'm not consuming
No.
that because ultimately I'm going to die. And
Yeah.
you got to ask yourself, what do you really want?
Yeah.
And I know what I want. I want energy. I want memory. I want clarity. I want focus. I want passion. I want to fulfill the mission I'm on earth to do. That's what I want. In the moment, I might want that brownie with,
Yeah.
vanilla ice cream and chocolate sauce on
Stop
it.
tempting me,
I
Abe.
want that. But it's not really what I want, right? That's the urge of the moment. But if you live giving in to the urges of the moment, you're not going to live as long.
Yeah. Two quick famous diagnoses, if you will. I'm going to tempt you now a little bit. First, I've been watching the president for many years, covering him, and, I've been near him enough to see how he operates. Now, he violates some of the very things that you advocate. I mean, he's drinking Diet Coke. He doesn't eat particularly well. He only sleeps 3 hours a night. He told me this 2 weeks ago. But he is very engaged. He's got a breakneck schedule. Give me a sense of the habits, his brain habits, and how are they affecting his brain, do you think?
So I don't think they're good for him. But yet, I want his brain so badly. Because anyone who was literally one of the most famous people in the world and beloved, to then run for president, to be hated, to be lied about, maligned, impeached, indicted, almost assassinated, and yet to show up every day, consistently working hard for us. I mean, that's a brain I'm so interested in because you're right. He doesn't sleep. It's bad for your brain. He eats lousy, although I hear with RFK on board, he's trying to do better, which is great.
Trying to get off the McDonald's.
But one of the things I think that helps him so much is when he was a kid, he went to Norman Vincent Peale's church. And Norman Vincent Peale preached a long time, and he showed up a lot to that church about how you think. And power of resilience and positive thinking was there at a formative age for him. And he's just the most resilient person that I know.
I'm amazed at his memory, though, doctor. You would think somebody who's eating that way, drinking Diet Coke, for God's sake, that they would have no recall. This man can recall things from 5 months ago down to the last detail. He sees hundreds of people a day. And it blew my mind. I mean, this was just very recently. And he recalled not only where we were, but what was said and his reaction to it. That's pretty astounding for a 78-year-old.
It's incredible. And he's a very unique person, for sure.
Let's talk about Pope Francis for a minute. He's 88 years old. He just battled double pneumonia, and he's on oxygen on and off now. He's mostly confined to a wheelchair. He's been in that wheelchair for a number of years now, doctor, largely isolated to his apartment for at least 2 months after 5 weeks of hospitalization. What do you see in that brain habit, and what effect do you think it had on his brain and his having?
Well, I think it's clearly the stress, the pneumonia, which then goes with lower oxygen levels, is clearly bad for his brain. That by itself will age his brain. And I don't know. I mean, we had the last Pope retire before,
Yeah.
right? I mean, it's like they almost should have term limits.
Yeah.
uh, because, they're running a massive organization for God, and one would think you'd want them at their peak. Uh, and when
Yeah.
he started, he was an amazing pope. But now, I mean, it's hard to function
Yeah.
when your health is not good.
Yeah.
And, thankfully, he came out of what a lot of people thought he wouldn't.
Yeah. No, he survived, but the question is, how does he continue governing now and running what is the last monarchy on the planet, supreme monarchy anyway? Doctor, I want to move on to something that I've been meaning to ask you. What is the thing you're encountering most in your practice now that you didn't see, say, 5 years ago?
Well, long COVID for sure. What we see with COVID and some with the vaccine is it activates the limbic system in the brain. And over time, so initially we see what looks like an inflammatory bomb go off in the brain. And then over time, it'll actually decrease blood flow and activity.
Oh my
So
gosh.
pairing COVID is very important.
Wow. Who would have thought that a vaccine could have that kind of impact on your brain, not only in the moment, but long term? So you're still seeing effects of this.
Yes.
It's amazing. Doctor, what's the final word? What would you advise people, given the stressors that we invite into our own lives with these devices, the world coming in on you because of media? What would be your final word to them to keep not only your brain healthy, but your soul healthy?
Well, I love the idea that you're not stuck with the brain you have. You can make it better. I can prove it. And it starts by caring about your brain. Very few people actually care about it. In 1991, when I started imaging, I didn't care about my own brain. And I'm a double board certified psychiatrist and was the top neuroscience student in medical school. But when I saw it and it wasn't as healthy as it could have been, I'm like, oh no, we have to make this better because your brain is involved in everything you do, how you think, how you feel, how you act, how you get along with other people. So it starts with caring. And then every day you just ask yourself, is this good for my brain or bad for it? And if you can answer that with information and love of yourself, love of your mission, love of the reason God put you on earth, you just start treating it better, and then you reap the benefits of that.
Well, Dr. Raymond, I'm so thankful for the way you've refocused us on not only our brain health, it's really about our lives and living a full life with purpose, with clarity, and to be as vibrant as you can in it at every stage. I thank you for that and hope to see you in person soon. Dr. Daniel Amen and the Amen Clinics. You've got how many now? 12? 12 clinics?
I have 11 clinics from New York to Seattle, Los Angeles, Dallas, Atlanta, Florida. Yeah.
Wow. I don't know how you do it all, but you do it, and you do it in good spirits and so well. Thank you, Dr. Daniel Amen. We'll check in with you in the days ahead.
Thanks, Raymond.
Thank you. Okay, here's the whole. You have the power to protect your brain and renew it. You heard what Dr. Raymond said. Diet, exercise, your mental state, the story you tell yourself, all of that can renew your mind and perhaps your world. Our special thanks to Dr. Amen, and I hope you'll come back soon to Arroyo Grande. Why live a dry, narrow, constricted life when if you fill it with good things, it can flow into a broad, thriving Arroyo Grande? I'm Raymond Arroyo. Make sure you subscribe, like this episode. Thank you for diving in, and we'll see you next time. Arroyo Grande is produced in partnership with iHeart Podcasts and Divine Providence Studios and is available on YouTube, the iHeart Radio app, or wherever you get your podcasts.